The Volksgerichtshof, a dire warning of justice subverted the courtroom, was a theater of terror. The accused stood alone, not before impartial arbiters of law, but before fanatics draped in judicial robes. The verdict was decided before the trial began, the sentence, a foregone conclusion. This was not justice, it was vengeance masquerading as legality. This was the Volksgerichtshof, the Nazi regime's people's court, a grotesque perversion of justice where law became a weapon of the state, wielded not to protect, but to destroy. Its existence stands as one of history's most chilling warnings: when courts cease to be independent, when judges become political enforcers, justice dies. And where justice dies, tyranny thrives. Now, before we move on with the story, please help a small channel grow. Like and subscribe. It means a lot to me. Okay, back to the story. The birth of a judicial monster established in 1934 under Adolf Hitler's regime, the Volksgerichtshof, VGH, was created with a singular purpose: to eliminate dissent. It replaced the existing Supreme Court, Reichsgericht, which, though not entirely free from political influence, had at least maintained some semblance of judicial independence. The VGH, by contrast, was designed to be a blunt instrument of Nazi ideology. Its most infamous figure, Roland Freisler, a fanatical Nazi jurist, presided over the court with a sadistic fervor. Trials were not proceedings of evidence and argument but spectacles of humiliation and condemnation. Defendants were berated, interrupted, and denied real legal defense. Freisler's screaming tirades were legendary. He was less a judge than a prosecutor, jury, and executioner fused into one malignant entity. The machinery of judicial murder. The VGH's primary targets were those accused of treason, a term so broadly defined that it could mean anything from plotting against Hitler to telling an anti-Nazi joke. The July 20th plotters, including Klaus von Stauffenberg, were among its most famous victims. Their trial was a farce, a staged performance meant to broadcast the regime's absolute dominance. But the VGH did not limit itself to high-profile cases. Thousands of ordinary Germans, workers, students, priests, were dragged before it. Many were sentenced to death for defeatism, a charge applied to anyone who expressed doubt in Germany's victory. The court's conviction rate was staggering. By some estimates, over 90% of cases ended in guilty verdicts, with more than 5,000 death sentences handed down. The trials were swift, brutal, and utterly devoid of fairness. Evidence was fabricated, confessions coerced, and defense attorneys reduced to mere formalities. The law, stripped of its moral foundation, became nothing more than a tool for exterminating enemies of the state. The erosion of judicial independence. The VGH did not emerge in a vacuum. It was the culmination of a gradual erosion of judicial independence that began even before Hitler's rise. The Weimar Republic's judiciary had already shown troubling signs of politicization, with many judges harboring nationalist and authoritarian sympathies. When the Nazis took power, they did not need to destroy the courts, they simply corrupted them from within. Judges who resisted were purged, those who remained either cooperated out of fear or conviction. The legal profession, once a bastion of reasoned deliberation, became an extension of the party's will. The very concept of an independent judiciary, a cornerstone of any free society, was systematically dismantled. A warning for all time. The Volksgerichtshof is not merely a historical horror, it is a cautionary tale. It demonstrates what happens when courts cease to be impartial, when judges are selected not for their integrity but for their loyalty to those in power. Today, in democracies across the world, the independence of the judiciary is under threat. Politicians rail against activist judges when rulings displease them. Courts are packed with ideologues rather than jurists. The rhetoric of law and order is twisted to justify the persecution of opponents. These are not mere political disputes, they are early warning signs of a justice system in peril. The lesson of the VGH is clear: without independent courts, there is no rule of law, only rule by power. When judges fear retribution for their decisions, when trials become political rituals rather than searches for truth, the very foundation of a free society crumbles. The Volksgerichtshof was not justice. It was murder in judicial robes. And its shadow lingers wherever the law is bent to serve the powerful rather than restrain them. We must never forget. We must never allow it to happen again. Thank you for watching my video. Please, like and subscribe.